I thought moving into this quiet suburban neighborhood would finally bring me peace. But within weeks, my life turned into a nightmare. The HOA claimed I violated community rules I never even agreed to, and slapped me with a $15,000 fine. When I fought back, they escalated, threatening lawsuits, property seizure, and even public humiliation at a board meeting. What they didn't know was that I had one piece of evidence that could destroy their entire operation. The question is, who would collapse first, me or them? When I first bought the house on Willow Creek Lane, I thought I had found my dream home. A quiet cul-de-sac, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and freshly painted fences, where neighbors waved good morning and kids rode their bikes freely. It felt like the perfect place to start fresh. My wife Emily and I had saved for years to afford this place. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, 3 bedrooms, a little backyard where our dog could run, and a small garden I'd been dreaming about planting since college. Every evening, we'd sit on the porch, sipping tea, watching the sunset over the quiet suburban streets. At first, the community felt perfect. People smiled, kids played outside, and the lawns looked like something out of a magazine. But looking back now, I realized something important. It was too perfect. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association, or HOA, wasn't just maintaining the community's standards. They were enforcing control. Subtle at first newsletters with cheerful reminders about keeping your grass under 3 inches, friendly emails about approved fence colors, and mandatory community meetings that everyone was encouraged to attend. At the time, I brushed it off. Rules are rules, right? I thought the HOA was just keeping the neighborhood beautiful. But soon I started noticing little things. Emily came home one afternoon holding a letter. Her voice trembled as she read it. Notice of violation, unauthorized modifications. Confused, I looked around our property. Everything was immaculate. We hadn't built anything new, hadn't painted the house, hadn't even planted the garden yet. The violation? A bird feeder. Apparently, our simple $15 wooden bird feeder, the one I'd built by hand with my nephew, attracted non-native species and violated HOA environmental regulations. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. But when I called the HOA office, the response wasn't what I expected. "Sir," the board member said flatly, "rules are rules. Remove the feeder immediately or face a $200 fine." That was the moment something shifted. I took down the feeder, annoyed but willing to comply. But a week later, another letter came, then another. Suddenly, it was the color of our shutters, apparently one shade darker than approved. Then it was my trash bins, apparently stored 3 inches outside of the designated zone. It became clear this wasn't about maintaining standards. This was about control. At first, I tried to reason with them, sending polite emails, attending meetings, even offering to repaint the shutters. But each time, I was met with cold, condescending smiles and statements like, "You agreed to these rules when you moved here." Emily wanted me to let it go, to avoid making waves. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It wasn't just us. I started talking to other neighbors, and their stories were even worse. One family had been fined $1,500 because their teenage son parked his car facing the wrong direction on the street. Another was forced to remove a small playhouse in their backyard because it obstructed the aesthetic view of the neighborhood. An elderly couple down the street had nearly lost their home after the HOA stacked late fees on top of fines until the debt became unpayable. But the real breaking point came when the HOA sent us a certified letter demanding $15,000 in cumulative fines and threatening to place a lien on our home if we didn't pay within 30 days. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about grass height, shutters, or bird feeders anymore. This was a battle for power. And if I was going to protect my home, my family, and everything we'd worked for, I'd have to fight back. I didn't know it then, but uncovering the truth about the HOA would lead me straight into a storm, one that would expose secrets, lies, and a betrayal so deep it would shake the entire neighborhood. The $15,000 fine changed everything. Up until that moment, I thought the HOA's rules were strict, maybe even ridiculous, but I still believed there had to be limits. I believed there had to be fairness. That letter shattered that illusion. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper in disbelief. Cumulative fines, it read. Late fees, administrative costs, community penalties. It didn't even make sense. Half of the charges weren't tied to any real violations. It felt manufactured. Emily sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in 10 minutes. They can't do this, she whispered, her voice breaking. But deep down, I knew they could. I decided to confront them directly. That weekend, I attended the monthly HOA board meeting. It was held at the community clubhouse, a modern, spotless space with big glass windows and freshly polished floors. Everything about it screamed money. As I walked in, the 5 board members sat behind a long table, arranged like judges waiting to pass sentence. At the center was Martin Hale, the HOA president, a tall, sharp-featured man in his early 50s, with a smug, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Before I could even sit down, Martin started. "Mr. Walker," he said, addressing me, without looking up from his papers. "We received your appeal, but I should warn you the fines are valid, and payment is expected within 30 days. I clenched my fist, forcing myself to stay calm. "Martin," I said evenly, "I need you to explain these charges. Half of them aren't tied to any actual violations. You can't just make up numbers." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands behind his head. "The HOA has the authority to enforce rules and penalties as outlined in the community bylaws. If you disagree, you're welcome to seek alternative resolutions." The way he said it, slow, deliberate, sent a chill through me. Alternative resolutions wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. After that meeting, things escalated fast. Within days, we started getting letters, almost daily violations for trash bins, for lawn edges, for non-compliant exterior lighting. Then came the inspections. I'd come home from work to find HOA members walking around my property, measuring things, snapping pictures, writing notes. No notice, no permission, just invading my space. When I confronted one of them, a board member named Janet, she smirked and said, "It's all in the bylaws, Mr. Walker. You signed them when you moved in." Emily was losing sleep. Every time she heard a car door at night, she'd peek through the blinds, terrified another notice was coming. The stress was eating us alive. And then, they went after our neighbors. The Hendersons, who lived 2 doors down, had always kept to themselves, quiet, polite people. But one night, David Henderson showed up at my door, pale and shaking, holding his own violation letter. They were fined $8,000 for unapproved landscaping, even though their yard looked better than half the neighborhood. "Martin's doing this on purpose," David said, his voice low. "If you fight back, he'll bury you. He's already threatened to foreclose on a house down the street." That's when I realized this wasn't just harassment. This was extortion. I started digging. Nights after work, I'd sit at my laptop, combing through old HOA documents, meeting minutes, and property records. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. The HOA's financial reports didn't add up. Thousands of dollars marked as maintenance fees had no receipts, payments for landscaping and security, but no contractors listed. And then buried in county records, I found something shocking. A small overlooked document, the original subdivision deed, signed 30 years ago. According to it, a strip of land behind the clubhouse, the same land the HOA had been renting out for private events, wasn't owned by them at all. It belonged to the original property developer, and based on the transfer records, it now belonged to me. That one discovery changed everything. If I could prove this, I had leverage, maybe enough to fight back. But I also knew if the HOA found out what I knew before I was ready, they'd come after me harder than ever. I should have known they were watching me. 2 days after I printed those records, I came home to find a bright red final warning notice taped to my front door. The fines had increased to $22,000, and they were threatening foreclosure proceedings. That night, someone slashed my car tires. Emily woke me at 2 a.m., shaking and crying, saying she heard footsteps outside. I grabbed a flashlight and went out, but the street was silent. No cars, no people. Just the sound of sprinklers and crickets under the dark suburban sky. The next morning, I installed cameras. 2 days later, when I checked the footage, my blood ran cold. It was Martin Hale, standing at the edge of our property, staring straight into the camera, smiling. By now, I wasn't sleeping. Every sound felt suspicious. Every letter in the mail felt like a bomb waiting to go off. But I wasn't the only one. Whispers spread through the neighborhood. More families were being fined into bankruptcy. One woman's house was foreclosed after she refused to pay $9,000 in violations for having unapproved curtains. Another family had moved out overnight, leaving their home empty and locked. At a late-night meeting at David Henderson's garage, a small group of neighbors gathered angry, exhausted, desperate. "They're stealing from us," David said, slamming a stack of letters on the table. "This isn't about rules. This is about control and money." I shared what I'd found: the financial discrepancies, the missing contractor payments, the land deed. As I spoke, I saw the fire ignite in their eyes. We decided, right there, to fight back together. The next HOA meeting was 3 days away. We spent every waking hour preparing printing documents, highlighting inconsistencies, rehearsing exactly what we'd say. The plan was simple: confront the board publicly, demand answers, and force them to account for every missing dollar. But the night before the meeting, something happened. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Rushing downstairs, I found our living room window smashed a rock lying on the floor with a note tied to it. "Stop or else." Emily begged me to drop it. "It's not worth it," she cried. "We'll lose everything." But I knew walking away now meant giving them exactly what they wanted. And after everything they'd done to us, the fines, the threats, the lies, I couldn't let them win. I didn't know it yet, but what was about to happen at that HOA meeting would change everything. By the end of it, there would be shouting, threats, and a revelation so explosive it would tear the entire neighborhood apart. And someone, maybe me, maybe them, would lose everything. The night before the HOA meeting, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying everything: the letters, the threats, Martin's smug face on my security camera, the rock through our window with that single warning: "Stop or else." But this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about fines or rules or property lines. This was about control, about an HOA abusing its power, draining families dry, and bullying anyone who dared to fight back. And tomorrow, we were going to confront them. The community clubhouse was packed that night, standing room only. Dozens of homeowners filled every chair, whispers bouncing across the room like sparks ready to ignite. At the front, the 5 HOA board members sat behind a long table, pretending everything was under control. In the middle sat Martin Hale, leaning back in his chair like a king surveying his kingdom, a smug half smile on his face. I glanced around the room and caught David Henderson's eye. He gave me a quick nod. We'd rehearsed this moment for days. The meeting began like every other Martin, reading the agenda in his smooth, controlled tone, pretending this was just another routine discussion about community standards and budget allocations. But when it came time for homeowner concerns, I stood. "Mr. Walker," Martin said, glancing at his papers without looking at me. 3 minutes, as always." I took a deep breath. "No, Martin," I said firmly, my voice carrying across the room. "Tonight, we're going to take as much time as we need." The room went silent. I walked to the front and dropped a thick binder of documents on the table with a loud thud. Pages spilled out copies of violation notices, financial records, property deeds, and old meeting minutes. "This," I said, my voice shaking with controlled anger, "is proof that this HOA has been abusing its power, misusing funds, and threatening homeowners into silence." Martin chuckled under his breath. "Mr. Walker, accusations like that are serious. I hope you have more than conspiracy theories and late-night Google searches." "Oh, I do." I held up the county deed records, waving them for everyone to see. According to official county documents, this HOA has been charging residents for the use of land it doesn't even own. This property, I pointed toward the clubhouse windows, gesturing at the manicured field behind them, belongs to me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors whispered to each other, faces pale, brows furrowed. Martin's smile faltered for the first time. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "That land has always been under HOA control." "Not according to the law," I said, slamming the deed onto the table. "And if you'd like to challenge that, we can let a judge decide. But while we're here, let's also talk about these." I flipped open the binder, revealing pages of missing expense reports, invoices without contractors, and unexplained maintenance fees, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Where's this money, Martin?" I demanded. "Where's the proof these landscaping and security contracts even exist? Because I called every company listed in your reports, and guess what? Not one of them has ever worked here." The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting, demanding answers. "You fined me $5,000 for painting my garage," one man yelled. "You lied about the security upgrades," another woman cried. "Where's our money, Martin?" someone else shouted from the back. For the first time, I saw fear in Martin's eyes, but just for a moment. Then he leaned forward, pounding his fist on the table to silence the room. "Enough!" he bellowed. "These are baseless accusations designed to distract from Mr. Walker's repeated violations and refusal to pay what he owes this community." He turned to face me, his voice cold and sharp. "Pay your fines, or we'll take your house. Those are your options." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No, Martin. My option is to fight back, and I'm not alone." That was the signal. David Henderson and 3 other neighbors stepped forward, each carrying their own binders of documents, fines, threats, and harassment notices. One by one, they placed them on the table in front of Martin. Dozens of other residents stood behind us, arms crossed, eyes locked on the board. This wasn't just me anymore. This was all of us. Martin glanced around the room, his jaw tightening, his facade cracking. Finally, he stood, towering over me. "You're making a mistake, Walker," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You think you've won something here, but you're playing a dangerous game. Walk away before you regret it." I met his stare and smiled. "Funny, I was about to tell you the same thing." Before Martin could respond, Janet, one of the quieter board members, suddenly slammed her pen down and stood. "I'm done," she said, her voice trembling, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not covering for you anymore, Martin." The entire room froze. "What are you talking about?" Martin snapped. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she shot back, pulling a folded document from her bag. "I kept copies. Every transfer, every hidden account. If you don't tell them, I will." The crowd erupted again, louder this time, a storm of anger and disbelief. Martin's face turned pale, his lips tightening into a thin, rigid line. Before anyone could calm the room, Martin lunged across the table, grabbing Janet's arm and shouting something I couldn't make out over the chaos. Security rushed forward, pulling them apart, but the damage was done. The quiet, perfect illusion of Willow Creek was shattered. Neighbors were screaming, demanding refunds, calling for new elections, some even threatening lawsuits on the spot. The board was in complete disarray, 2 members walking out, one in tears, another pale and silent. And through it all, Martin sat back down, sweating, silent, glaring at me with pure hatred. When the room finally quieted, I stepped forward one last time. "This ends tonight," I said firmly. "No more harassment, no more threats, no more stolen money. We're forming a homeowner coalition. We're auditing every dollar, every fine, every decision this board has made. And if you try to retaliate against any of us again, we'll take this to court." Martin didn't respond. He just stared at me, his jaw tight, his knuckles white against the table. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. because now he was afraid of us. We thought that was the end. We thought exposing the truth would finally bring peace to Willow Creek. But we were wrong. Because 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at my door from the HOA's attorney. Inside was a single sentence typed in bold: "See you in court." The night of the HOA meeting changed everything. The illusion of control, the power Martin held, the fear he'd planted in all of us. It all cracked that night. But if we thought the battle was over, we were wrong. In reality, the real war had just begun. 2 days after the meeting, I received the letter. A thick, cream-colored envelope, delivered by certified mail, bearing the letterhead of Harrison Finch Attorneys, at law the HOA's firm. Inside was a single statement: the Willow Creek Homeowners Association versus Daniel Walker. Defendant is hereby notified of civil proceedings to recover $22,374 in unpaid fines, penalties, and legal costs. I stared at the letter in silence, my chest tight, my throat dry. Emily was sitting across the table, her hands trembling as she read over my shoulder. "They're suing us?" she whispered. It was official. Martin wasn't just trying to scare us anymore. He wanted to crush us. I called David Henderson immediately. Within an hour, 6 neighbors were crammed into my living room, the letter lying open on the coffee table like a bomb no one wanted to touch. "This is his play," David said grimly. "He wants to make an example out of you. If he buries you in court, the rest of us will back down." But I wasn't backing down. Not now. I told everyone about the missing funds, the fake contractors, the deed proving the HOA didn't even own half the land it claimed to control. For weeks we'd been gathering evidence, but now it was time to take the next step. We hired an attorney, Carla Ramirez, a sharp, relentless woman with a reputation for dismantling abusive HOAs. From the moment she read through the documents, she smiled. "This," she said, tapping the binder full of missing financial records, "isn't just harassment, it's fraud." Over the next 2 months, Carla filed countersuits, subpoenas, and requests for full financial disclosure. That's when the cracks in Martin's empire started to widen. Buried in bank statements, we found proof of unauthorized transfers over $280,000, quietly funneled from HOA accounts into a private company Martin owned under a different name. And it didn't stop there. We uncovered fake security invoices, non-existent landscaping contractors, and thousands of dollars in administrative fees Martin had paid, directly to himself. By the time Carla was done piecing it all together, the picture was clear. Martin Hale had been running Willow Creek like his personal ATM. When this information hit the neighborhood, the reaction was explosive. At the next HOA meeting, the same people Martin had ruled over with fear for years now turned against him. Residents screamed, demanding his resignation. Board members, the ones who had quietly followed his lead, resigned on the spot, terrified of being implicated. Janet, the board member who had confronted Martin during the last meeting, provided us with internal emails proving that Martin had ordered the fines and liens intentionally targeting certain families, including mine. Martin tried to fight back, yelling about fake documents and lies designed to destroy him. But when Carla stood up, reading directly from bank statements bearing his signature, the room went silent. That night, the homeowners voted unanimously to suspend Martin and dissolve the existing board entirely. A temporary committee made up of ordinary residents was formed to oversee the HOA until elections could be held. For the first time in months, we all walked out of the clubhouse feeling lighter, stronger, united. But the fight wasn't over. Martin still had his lawsuit against me. 6 months later, we faced him in court. Emily sat beside me, squeezing my hand as we waited for the hearing to begin. Martin walked in, flanked by 2 attorneys, wearing the same smug expression he'd worn the first day we met, as if he still believed he couldn't lose. But when Carla began presenting the evidence, his confidence crumbled. She laid out everything: the fake invoices, the missing funds, the forged contracts, and the land deed, proving the HOA had no right to fine us for property they didn't own. Halfway through, Martin's attorney started whispering frantically, passing papers back and forth. By the end of the second day, they requested a settlement negotiation. The judge gave them an hour. When we returned, Martin was pale and shaking. His attorneys offered to drop the lawsuit, dissolve all fines, and reimburse every dollar he'd stolen, not just from me, but from every homeowner in Willow Creek. We rejected his first offer. Carla leaned forward, calm but firm, and said, "Mr. Hale, either you settle on our terms, or we take this to trial and you walk out of here in handcuffs." He settled. Within 3 months, every homeowner in Willow Creek received a refund check. The board was permanently restructured, with new oversight rules in place to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Martin, he resigned in disgrace. A criminal investigation followed, and last I heard, he's facing multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. For the first time in almost 2 years, Emily and I could breathe again. We finally planted the garden I'd been dreaming about. The bird feeder, the same one that started all this, hangs proudly in our backyard. But more than that, something bigger happened. The fear was gone. Neighbors started talking again, kids played outside, and the entire community came together in a way it never had before. We learned something powerful that year. When we stand together, we're stronger than the people who try to control us. I wish I could tell you this story is unique, but it isn't. Across the country, HOAs are quietly abusing their power, overcharging families, issuing outrageous fines, and even threatening to take homes from people who worked their whole lives to afford them. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. You have rights. You can fight back. And when neighbors unite, even the most powerful HOA president can fall. So what do you think? Was Martin a greedy criminal from the start? Or did the system enable him to believe he could get away with it? And more importantly, ma'am, if your HOA tried to take your home, how far would you go to fight back? Tell me in the comments, because trust me, I read them all.